lost her head. Even when she's giving good head, she says, hey.
But here's what the history books never told you. Most of these songs almost didn't exist. One was written in 15 minutes backstage. One was recorded in a barn. One was created by accident in 30 seconds of studio improvisation that nobody was even ready to capture on tape. And if any one of those moments had gone differently, even slightly, music history looks completely different today. So the question isn't whether you know these songs. You know them. The question is, do you know what it actually costs to make them? Stay with me, because by the time we get to number 1, you're going to hear something about that recording session that will genuinely change the way you listen to that song for the rest of your life. The real version. The version with the arguments, the accidents, the grief, the genius, and the moments that changed everything. If that's the kind of music storytelling you've been looking for, hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And before we start, drop a comment below. Tell me, what year in music history do you think was the greatest of all time? I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Share this video with someone who grew up with this music, someone who still turns it up the moment it comes on, because they deserve to know these stories too. All right, 10 songs, one extraordinary year, and stories that have been waiting 50 years to be told properly. Let's start the countdown. Number 10, The Rolling Stones, Tumbling Dice, warm conspiratorial tone, like you're sharing a secret. Picture this. It's 1971. The Rolling Stones are tax exiles. They've literally fled England to avoid paying their bills to the British government. They've rented a crumbling old mansion in the south of France called Villeneuve-Cote. And they've turned the basement into a recording studio. Not a proper studio, not a soundproofed room with good lighting and a coffee machine. A basement, damp walls, bad ventilation, cables running everywhere, cats wandering in and out. And in that chaos, that gloriously messy, humid, smoky chaos, they started recording what would become Exile on Main Street. Tumbling Dice almost didn't make it onto the album at all. Here's the thing most people don't know. The song started life under a completely different name, Good Time Women. It was a rougher, less defined thing. Keith Richards had the riff. Mick Jagger had fragments of melody. But the song was restless, unfinished, living in pieces. And then something shifted. Jagger started reworking the lyrics from scratch. He wanted it to feel like gambling, like risk, like the way life itself feels when you're throwing everything on one number and watching the dice roll. Women think I'm tasty, but they're always trying to waste me. That kind of raw, almost careless confidence, that was Mick Jagger at his most magnetic. When Tumbling Dice dropped as a single in 1972, it went to number 7 in the US, number 5 in the UK. But the chart position doesn't tell you the real story. The real story is what the song felt like coming out of a car radio on a sticky summer afternoon. It felt like freedom, like motion, like somebody had taken the recklessness of being young and pressed it into 3.5 minutes of groove. Rolling Stone magazine would later put Exile on Main Street at number 7 on their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Tumbling Dice was the heartbeat that introduced it to the world. That's not just a great song. That's a mood that never goes out of style. But if you thought that story was good, the next song on this list has a story that almost nobody knows. And it will genuinely surprise you. Number 9, America. A Horse with No Name. Slower, more reflective, almost dreamlike. There are songs that sound like a place. A Horse with No Name sounds like silence. It sounds like heat rising off the ground. It sounds like the exact feeling of being completely, utterly alone in the most beautiful way possible. When this song dropped in early 1972, it hit #1 in the United States. #1. And almost immediately, radio programmers across the country started refusing to play it. Not because of the content, not because of the sound, because they were convinced it was a Neil Young record. The resemblance to Young's vocal style was so striking that some stations actually pulled it from rotation, worried they were somehow being fooled.
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be.
Dewey Bunnell, the young British American who wrote the song, was barely 20 years old. And here's the story behind the story. Bunnell had never actually been to a desert when he wrote it. He wrote it from a memory of driving through Arizona and New Mexico as a child, looking out the car window at the vast empty landscape, that ochre flatness stretching out forever. He was living in London when he wrote it. Cold, gray, rainy London. And somewhere in that homesickness for a place he barely knew, something extraordinary came out.
The 9 days I let the horse run free, 'cause the desert.
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. The genius of that line is that it's both absolutely nothing, it's a silly image if you think about it too hard, and absolutely everything. It's the feeling of being somewhere so vast that even you don't quite exist. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The song was almost never released as a single. The label wasn't sure about it. It didn't fit any tidy category. It wasn't quite folk, wasn't quite rock, wasn't quite pop. It was just itself. And America's manager convinced Warner Brothers to put it out anyway. Within weeks, it was #1 in 11 countries. Sometimes the songs that belong nowhere find a home everywhere. That truth has never stopped being beautiful. But now we're moving into the top 8. And the stories are about to get even deeper. #8, T-Rex, Telegram Sam.
Telegram Sam, Telegram Sam,
More energetic, almost electric, the feeling of stumbling onto something wild. Not every revolution announces itself politely. Some revolutions just kick the door open, plug in the amp, and go.
Bobby's alright, Bobby's alright, he's a.
Mark Bolan was already a cult figure in Britain by 1972. T-Rex had exploded with Get It On and Bang a Gong the year before. But Telegram Sam was something different. This was Bolan at his most pure, his most himself. Written in about 15 minutes, supposedly while Bolan was backstage before a concert, the song is a beautiful, strutting, nonsensical piece of glam rock perfection.
Telegram Sam, you're my man.
Nobody fully agrees on who Telegram Sam actually is. Some say it's a reference to a dealer who supplied the band. Some say it's a fictional character Bolan invented purely for the sound of the name. Some say it's a coded self-portrait. Bolan himself gave different answers at different times, which tells you everything you need to know about Mark Bolan. He was interested in mythology, in mystique, in the idea that a song didn't need to be explained. It needed to be felt. Telegram Sam hit #1 in the UK in February 1972, and what it represented was bigger than the chart. It represented the full arrival of glam rock as a cultural force. The sparkle, the platform boots, the androgyny. Bolan was telling a generation of young kids, especially kids who didn't fit neatly into any box, that they were allowed to take up space, to be loud, to be beautiful, to be strange. That message, that specific message, would echo forward through David Bowie, through Freddie Mercury, through Prince, through Lady Gaga, all the way to artists releasing music right now. All of it has Bolan's fingerprints on it somewhere. But that's not even the most remarkable part of this story. The most remarkable part? Mark Bolan died in a car crash in 1977. He was 29 years old, and in the years since, T-Rex has been cited as a primary influence by more than 100 major artists. He never got to see any of it. Sometimes the people who change everything never know they changed anything. Keep that thought close. We're going to need it later in this countdown. Number 7. Neil Young. Heart of Gold. Quiet, intimate, like a late-night conversation. There's a song that every generation seems to rediscover on their own. Not because someone told. Number 6. David Bowie. Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy played guitar, jamming good way.
Build energy slowly. This one deserves ceremony. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you didn't quite belong in your own time? Like you were somehow built for a different world? David Bowie spent his whole life feeling exactly that. And in 1972, he stopped trying to fit in. He invented an alien rock star, named him Ziggy Stardust, put on makeup, wild costumes, and a shock of orange hair, and became him, not performed him, became him. The album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is one of the most conceptually ambitious records ever made. It tells the story of an alien rock messiah who comes to Earth, burns bright, and destroys himself. And the title track, Ziggy Stardust, is the centerpiece. A song about a fictional character written by a man who was simultaneously becoming a character himself. Here's what most people don't know. Bowie based Ziggy Stardust on several real people. Vince Taylor, a troubled British rock singer who had a full mental breakdown on stage, told his fans he was the son of God, and then disappeared into obscurity.
Ziggy played for time, jiving on style.
Iggy Pop, whose raw, dangerous energy Bowie was obsessed with. Kansai Yamamoto, the Japanese fashion designer whose extraordinary costumes Bowie wore. And to some extent, Bowie himself. Ziggy was a portrait painted from fragments of broken, brilliant people. And when Bowie performed as Ziggy, he did something that genuinely disturbed and thrilled audiences in equal measure. He put his arm around guitarist Mick Ronson on stage. He behaved in ways that television producers in 1972 were completely unprepared for. He was queerness made visible in an era when that was genuinely radical.
Ziggy nearly sang, screwed up eyes and...
For countless young people watching at home, kids who felt different, felt alien, felt like they didn't have a word for what they were. Seeing Ziggy Stardust on television was a revelation, a permission slip, proof that there was a place for them. That is what a song can do when it's more than a song. That is what art looks like when an artist is fully, fearlessly themselves. Ziggy Stardust didn't just make the charts, it remade people. And we're only at number 6. The stories get bigger from here. Quick question. How many of these songs took you somewhere the moment you heard them? How many of them dropped a memory right in your lap? A face, a feeling, a place you haven't thought about in years? If you're still here, watching every second of this, you are exactly why EchoLore exists. Because we're not just talking about music, we're preserving memories. Number 5. Black Sabbath. Supernaut. Drop the tone lower. This one has weight. There is a room inside heavy metal, a foundational room, and Black Sabbath built it. By 1972, Sabbath had already given the world their debut, Paranoid, and a sound so heavy it felt like it had physical mass. But Supernaut, from the album Volume 4, was something else entirely. Something that even today sounds like it came from a place most musicians never reach.
Across the ocean, so many men.
Here's what makes this song extraordinary. It was recorded during one of the most chemically intense, financially chaotic, personally destructive periods in the band's history. They recorded Volume 4 in Los Angeles, rented a mansion, and spent somewhere in the region of $75,000, a staggering amount for 1972, on cocaine. The record company found out. There were threats, there were arguments, and in the middle of all that madness, Ozzy Osbourne and Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi and Bill Ward made this. Supernaut has a riff so precise, so powerful, that it has been sampled, covered, and cited by artists across 50 years of music. John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, widely considered one of the greatest rock drummers in history, publicly said that Bill Ward's drum performance on Supernaut was one of his all-time favorites. Let that land for a second. John Bonham, calling another drummer extraordinary. But that's not even the most incredible part of this story. Adam Yauch of the Beastie Boys, who was a devoted music scholar, spent years trying to sample Supernaut for hip-hop records. The song's influence crossed every genre boundary. It didn't care about categories. It cared about power. Supernaut is what happens when four human beings get out of their own way and let something bigger than themselves come through. And somehow, that something, that force, that darkness, that transcendent groove, is still moving through music today. Wherever you find heaviness done with intelligence, wherever you find rhythm played with supernatural precision, you'll find the ghost of Supernaut in there somewhere. Now we're in the top 4, and the stories from this point forward, these are the ones that changed everything. Number 4, Lou Reed, Walk on the Wild Side. Conspiratorial, slow, warm like amber light. Sometimes the most revolutionary things look perfectly ordinary on the surface. Walk on the Wild Side has a bass line so gentle it almost sounds like an afterthought. It has a tempo that never rushes. It has a saxophone solo, played by Ronnie Ross, who had once given a young David Bowie his very first saxophone lesson, that feels like it's exhaling.
But she never lost her head, even when she's giving good head, she says, hey.
And buried in the verses of this song, delivered in Lou Reed's most casual, almost bored conversational style, are stories of transgender women, male hustlers, drug users, and the ecstatic outsiders who inhabited Andy Warhol's factory scene in New York. In 1972, on mainstream radio, the BBC actually played Walk on the Wild Side for months before someone apparently read the lyrics properly and realized what the song was describing.
Everybody had a pay. A hustle.
And the colored girls go, that famous do-do-do refrain. It was so innocent sounding, so almost playful, that it masked the song's genuine radicalism. Lou Reed, who had been fired from his previous band, the Velvet Underground, and was working in his father's accounting firm when David Bowie personally reached out to bring him back to music, wrote a song that named people society had deliberately made invisible. He gave them names: Holly, Candy, Little Joe, Jackie, Sugar Plum Fairy. Real people, lightly fictionalized, who passed through Warhol's orbit. He made them permanent. The song peaked at number 16 in the U.S. and number 10 in the U.K.
New York City, honey's a place where they said.
Mean almost nothing compared to what the song did. It created a document, a portrait of a world that the culture at large preferred not to acknowledge. And it did it so smoothly, so warmly, so elegantly, that people were already in love with the song before they fully understood what it was telling them. Lou Reed called that sleight of hand. The rest of the world called it genius. And we're not done yet, because right above Walk on the Wild Side is a song whose recording session produced a moment so accidental, so unrepeatable, that even the musicians couldn't believe what they'd captured. Number 3, Elton John, Crocodile Rock.
I remember when I was young, we usually had so much fun.
Shift to brightness, joy, pure nostalgic electricity. Not everything from 1972 was dark, not everything was heavy. Some of it was just joy. Pure, ridiculous, absolutely irresistible joy. Crocodile Rock opens with a piano figure so instantly recognizable that the very moment, those first notes come on, something in your body responds. Your foot moves, your head moves, something inside you loosens and lifts. That reaction is not accidental. Elton John and Bernie Taupin wrote Crocodile Rock as a deliberate love letter to the music they grew up on. It's stuffed with references to Oh Susanna, to the falsetto style of Del Shannon, to the teenage dance crazes of the early 60s. It's nostalgia for nostalgia, memory folded inside memory. And yet somehow it feels completely, urgently alive. Here's the story behind the song that most people don't know. By 1972, Elton John was already one of the biggest stars in the world. But there was enormous pressure, from the label, from the industry, to produce a hit single that would conquer America. Not just chart in America. Conquer it. The relationship between Elton and his lyricist Bernie Taupin, a partnership that remains one of the most extraordinary collaborations in music history, was under more scrutiny than ever. Taupin wrote the lyrics on a page. Elton wrote the music. They almost never wrote in the same room. And yet, Crocodile Rock sounds like one brain, one heart, one single burst of uninhibited happiness. It became Elton John's first #1 hit in the United States. First #1, followed by 12 more #1s in the years that followed. But there was something about that first one. Something about hearing it in 1972, in roller rinks, at school dances, through the speakers of a car driving nowhere in particular, that nobody who lived it has ever been able to fully explain. You just had to be there. And if you were, you remember exactly where. But now we're at #2, and if you've been watching this whole countdown, what I'm about to tell you is going to hit differently. Because the story behind our #2 isn't just a music story. It's a story about survival. #2, the Allman Brothers Band. Melissa.
Crossroads.
The voice should soften, almost gentle. Some songs carry grief in them, not just emotional grief, not just metaphorical heartbreak, real, actual devastating grief. Melissa is one of those songs. Gregg Allman wrote the melody when he was 17 years old. 17. He had the chord changes. He had the feeling. He sat with it for years, searching for the right words. And eventually, with a name borrowed from a Spanish-speaking woman he'd briefly met and never forgotten, he had it. Sweet Melissa.
Was sweet Melissa.
The Allman Brothers Band recorded it in 1972 for their album, Eat a Peach. And here is where this story becomes something almost unbearable. Eat a Peach was dedicated to Duane Allman. Duane, the extraordinary slide guitarist, the visionary founder of the band, Gregg's older brother, had died in a motorcycle accident in October 1971. He was 24 years old, and less than a year after Duane's death, the band's bass player Barry Oakley, who had been so destroyed by losing his friend that he had reportedly driven to Duane's crash site constantly in the months following, was killed in his own motorcycle accident, just 3 blocks from where Duane had died. The world that existed when Melissa was being recorded was a band in genuine mourning, playing music because they didn't know what else to do, because music was the only place left that made any sense. Melissa is beautiful in the way that only things shaped by real loss can be beautiful. It doesn't try to comfort you. It just sits with you. It says, I know it hurts. I know. When Greg Allman performed it in his later years, after he himself had weathered decades of addiction, illness, loss, and recovery, you could see something in his face during that song. Something private, something that hadn't changed since he was 17 and had first heard that melody in his own head. Melissa charted. It was celebrated. It won over an entire generation of listeners who had never set foot in the American South and yet felt somehow at home in every note. But none of that, not a single chart position, captures what this song actually is. What it is a door you can walk through and find something waiting on the other side. Something that feels like love and grief and memory and hope all tangled together. The way life actually feels. Which brings us, at last, to number one. Number 1, Led Zeppelin. Rock and roll. Maybe that's the real mystery. The charts moved on in 1972. The headlines moved on. New artists came. New sounds arrived. Entire worlds were born and lived and ended. But these songs never moved on. They just kept being true. Because great music isn't really about a year. It isn't really about a chart position or a Grammy or a gold record on somebody's wall. It's about a feeling, and feelings don't have expiration dates. These songs found you once. In a car, in a kitchen, in a bedroom, in a stadium, in your own quiet head, late at night. They found you, and something in you recognized them. Not because you memorized them, but because you lived them. They became the soundtrack to moments you still carry. The background music to a version of yourself you still love. That's not nostalgia. That's not sentimentality. That is the oldest, truest thing about being human. We tell stories, we make music, we remember, and we pass it on.
That keeps me searching for a heart of gold.
Now I want to hear from you. How many of these songs took you somewhere the moment you heard the title? Which one still gives you chills, actual chills, every single time it comes on? And honestly, which song do you think deserved to be on this list that we missed? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this journey through 1972 meant something,